We're live.
So because for Palestine, it's just economics and environment right now. And I do have, well, the economics one here. I'll just put it right on top. But there were several things in the news that I wanted to take a look at. And the simulation starts on the 9th. If we look at economics and environment on Monday, we should be okay. So Megan gave me an article about new homes in East Jerusalem, and Hannah told me about the question being asked the Democratic candidates about Palestine, and then the UN. Actually, when you told me about the debate, I went and looked it up because it was really, their responses were actually interesting, to say the least. So, well, let me see if anybody has a question, comment, or concern before I go ahead. Or we reasonably copacetic. We okay in Olean and Dunkirk? Are we okay?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. See, it's so much better when you turn the lights on. Wow. I can see you, I can see the room, I'm excited. Because if we turn off the lights in here and kept the shades down, it'd be really dark. Okay, so we still have economics and environment, but we're okay with the opening statement from the president. We're okay with human rights, so we're in good shape. But I wanted to take a moment with some of the information that has been floating out there in the real world. And it's a Democratic debate. Candidates weigh in on Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And one of the reasons I haven't been watching the debates is not that I don't care, in fact, I'm a Democratic member of the Democratic Party, and I'm going to have to vote in the April New York primary if it gets that far. I mean, either way, there'll be a primary here. But I haven't been paying attention because I get tired of them sort of screaming at each other instead of dealing with issues. And so I looked this one up because I was intrigued, thanks to Hannah. That might be a little small. I think I can. So hopefully that's fairly visible, especially if your eyesight is better than mine. Mine's pretty good, but with corrected lenses. It says the South Carolina Democratic debate was defined by chaos, interruptions, personally is tomorrow. But the moderators who largely failed to control the tempo of the conversation did manage to ask a couple of questions on foreign policy on Tuesday to the candidates vying to replace Donald Trump as the commander-in-chief of the U.S. Armed Forces. And this is another reason, this next sentence, why typically I'm not watching this. I'll read about it in the paper or somebody will say something to me. The previous debate did not include a single mention of foreign policy. I don't know how you do that. The United States is still the most powerful country in the world. How do you not, at a presidential debate, ask a question about foreign policy? So it's another reason I don't watch these things. I read about them. And the research shows that most elections for the president are decided on two things: domestic policy and if you like the person. And typically the outcome is if the economy is good, the president will get reelected. There's also some research that shows that all things being equal, the taller candidate beats the shorter candidate. You know, interesting to me. But the lack of foreign policy questions really disturbs me. So I think I'm not a big Bernie fan. I don't have answers, I think, on Palestine, especially because Bernie is an American Jewish person. And he seems to show the most compassion and understanding. This is the second time. And its headline, "We cannot ignore the suffering of Palestinians." And then it goes on, with more than a third of the delegates required to win the nomination at stake in elections over the next week, Senator Bernie Sanders, the front runner in the race, was questioned about his decision to skip the annual conference of the pro-Israel lobby, AIPAC. Now, AIPAC is regarded as the most powerful lobby in the United States, even more powerful than the NRA and gun rights lobbies. So that's pretty powerful because the NRA and gun rights lobbies are right behind it and have been losing a little bit of influence because of things like the recent Milwaukee shooting. But the pro-Israeli lobby is extraordinarily powerful, and this is a group of Americans who happen to be Jewish, although there are some non-Jews in it as well. And they're fully in support of Israel, and of course they lobby the president, they lobby the Congress. And here you have Bernie Sanders, who, if he would get elected, would be the first Jewish president we ever had, skipping the pro-Israeli lobby. Now, all things being normal, which this year it is not, that typically would be the kiss of death for a Democrat. Typically a Democrat, because Jewish people who vote in very high numbers and tend to vote Democratic, you do not skip AIPAC. Bernie, to his credit, is skipping it. "I'm very proud of being Jewish," Sanders said. "I actually lived in Israel for some months, but what I happen to believe in is that rights," now sadly, I think that's, tragically in Israel, through Bibi Netanyahu, the prime minister, you have a reactionary racist. This is pretty strong language, especially from an American Jew. It shows that a lot of American Jews do not support the Israeli government. You have a reactionary racist who's now running that country. The Vermont senator also reiterated his stance that U.S. policy in the Middle East should be about is absolutely protecting the independence and security of Israel. But you cannot ignore the suffering of the Palestinian people. To his great credit, he refers, as we have and the EU has, as the Palestinian people, and talks about their suffering. The self-proclaimed democratic socialist, who was facing attacks from every direction on the stage, also refused to rule out returning the U.S. Embassy to Tel Aviv after Donald Trump had moved it to Jerusalem, declaring that the holy city, the capital of Israel. The move enraged Palestinians, I'll say, and was rejected overwhelmingly by the UN General Assembly. The answer is something we would take into consideration, he said, when asked about the issue. So he certainly did not rule it out. Then you have Mike Bloomberg, who comes right out and says you can't move the embassy back, but I don't understand that because Donald Trump moved it in opposition to American public or foreign policy under both Republicans and Democrats not to do so, from Harry Truman all the way through Barack Obama, including both sides of the aisle. Former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, who is so far the only Democratic candidate who has confirmed attending AIPAC, so he's planning to go. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with the others, but he says he's going. Drew a sharp contrast with Sanders on Israel. Bloomberg said the embassy would stay in Jerusalem if he were to be elected president. You can't move the embassy back. Well, yeah, you can. We should not have done it without getting something from the Israeli government. So he's saying, well, you can do it, but we should have negotiated some kind of deal, but it doesn't say what. But it was done, and you're going to have to leave it there. Well, again, no, you don't. Sanders did say he'd move it, but he said he wouldn't rule it out. He also said he supports a two-state solution to the conflict where Palestinians would be accommodated. Now, I don't know what it means to accommodate them. Just like I don't know what it means that if you move the embassy, you should have gotten something out of the Israeli government. I don't know what that means either. So I find Bloomberg's statement to be a little wishy-washy. The real problem here is you have two groups of people, that's good, both of whom think God gave them the same piece of land, that's reasonably true. And the answer is to obviously, I don't know, it's obvious what he thinks it is, split it up, the ex-mayor said. Bloomberg also referred to Israel's settlements in the occupied West Bank, which are seen as illegal. Now, they are illegal under international law, so this one's a little weak, which are seen as illegal by much of the rest of the world. That's true, but they are clearly in violation. Everyone who knows anything about international law will tell you those are clearly in violation. As new communities saying that they should not have been built. Well, I'm glad he said they should not have been built. But then Settlement Sanders shouted, correcting him from across the stage. They are colonial settlements, not communities. So Sanders, and I put their names together, came up with Sandberg. Sanders, on this issue alone, at least from my perspective, you haven't been so nice to tell me about it.
I guess I was kind of shocked they said, they think a two-state solution would be better.
Well, the two-state solution is something that keeps floating around. Now, when we get to the point much later on, this part of the syllabus was to come up with a solution. I mean, we could do two-state, we could do one-state. We're going to have to decide among ourselves, but the two-state thing seems to be there. Some people say it's like the only thing you can do, but I don't know. I guess you guys will have to decide. Yes.
I don't know if you watched that, got a chance to watch that video of the Israelis and Palestinians like talking.
No, the one you sent me?
Yeah.
No, unfortunately, I didn't get a chance yet.
One of the things they talked about was like possible solutions, and it seemed like most of them agreed on a one-state solution, but then the problem was they couldn't decide who would be in control. The Palestinians said like either Palestine or on that issue.
So both sides wanted to do two-state, but they couldn't decide.
They wanted
one state,
yeah.
but they couldn't decide who would be in charge.
Yeah, that seemed to be the biggest issue. I mean, that was only 6 people though, so
Yeah.
I mean.
Well, I mean, part of the problem is that in terms of birth rate, Palestinians would eventually have more people than Jewish people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can see why Israel, if they think this is the Jewish homeland, you're probably not going to buy it. But the other thing you could do is, you could do what we would call federalism or confederation. Like the United States is made up of 50 states. So you could have, I don't know what we call it, but you could have another possibility. But, if you look at the United States, we have 50 states, and New York is dramatically different than, say, South Carolina. But then, still got to have somebody control the national government. And, we have the Senate where everybody gets 2 seats. I mean, you could do something like that. But with us, at least it's 50. With them, it would only be 2. Unless, because you couldn't make Gaza and West Bank 2 different states. The Palestinians would never go for that. Because then I'm thinking, well, why not a 3-state solution? Israel, Palestine, and Gaza. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking out loud because I don't think the Palestinians would go for that. Yeah. And then Senator Warren chimed in. Why can't, it's Amy, anybody know her name from Minnesota? I always get her name screwed up. Senator, somebody help me. What's the name of the senator from Minnesota who's running for president? Why can't I think of her name? I have a block on it. And then there's various minor candidates. But.
Amy Klobuchar.
Spell it? No, it's
Klobuchar.
Yeah, Klobuchar. I knew if I could, I blocked poor Amy out. And then Elizabeth Warren. Senator Warren weighed in on the question, saying that it is not up to Americans to determine what the resolution or the conflict should look like. Well, we have to play a role with $1.3 billion of U.S. aid going to Israel every year. It almost like Warren, this bothered me on this issue. It's like She just didn't want to make a statement, but I guess nobody did as strong as Bernie. But the Americans made Israel possible. We have to be part of it. The Israelis have a right to security. I agree with that. And the Palestinians have a right to be treated with dignity. That's good, and to have self-determination. And that is a two-state solution. Warren criticized Trump for putting a thumb on the scale in favor of Israel. Well, our thumb's been on that scale for a long time. He's just pushed it further, which he said is moving the sides further away from finding their own solution. I would agree with that. We want to be a good ally to everyone in the region. The best way to do that is to encourage the parties to get to the negotiating table themselves. Warren either dodged or misunderstood the question on whether she would move back the embassy in Tel Aviv, saying it's not ours to do. Well, yeah, it is. I think she misunderstood. Even though the location of U.S. diplomatic posts would be entirely in the hands of the president, especially if you're voting in the primary or voting in the, hopefully in the general. I still think Sanders' statement is the most forthright. And some people have been speculating as to why he's doing so well. And some people said it's because even if you don't agree with him, or you think some of his ideas are impractical, like free healthcare and free college tuition, which he really still hasn't said how he's going to pay for it. At least he has been making statements, and he has not backed down. He's not tailoring his message to sway people. He's saying, this is what I plan to do as president, and he's sticking to it. I mean, you got to respect that, I think, but even though I don't know if he's going to be the candidate. I mean, if he is, I'll vote for him, but make a secret about it. So I noticed in here they mentioned the General Assembly, but then the other article that I pulled out, UN reiterates support for two-state Israel-Palestine solution. Now, this is the vote from the Security Council made up of the victorious allies from World War II, which really control the UN because they have the veto power, versus the General Assembly, which can weigh in but doesn't have any control. And what you can see is this constant two-state. Now, that doesn't mean we can't have a one state. That doesn't mean we can't have a confederation. We got to figure out what we're going to do at some point down the pike. But this is all brand new because this is February 24th. And it says the UN Security Council on Monday reiterated its support for a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in its first statement following the unveiling of the U.S. plan that President Trump and his son-in-law put forward for resolving the decades-old struggle 3 weeks ago. President Donald Trump's plan sided with Israel, no kidding, on most of the conflict's main sticking points. You know, that when Warren talked about his thumb on the scale, and the Palestinians rejected it outright, so it's not bringing anybody to the table. The UN statement, which was approved by all 15 council members, including the U.S., made no mention of Trump's plan. I don't know why. It also didn't directly address Palestinians' demands for an independent state, including all of the West Bank. And sorry, they got a little messed up when I copied it. And captured by Israel in the 67 Mideast War, and the removal of many of the more than 700,000 Israeli settlers from these areas. So it said there should be a two-state solution, but it left two important details out, because Palestine would want all the West Bank included, and it would want all the settlers to leave. Trump's plan didn't allow for the removal. But the UN statement did voice the Council's support for a negotiated two-state solution, recalling previous relevant UN resolutions and in accordance with international law, where two democratic states, Israel and Palestine, live side by side in peace within secure and recognized borders. This statement was drafted by Belgium, which is a member of the Security Council, because they have 10 temporary members, which holds the Council presidency this month. The irony of Belgium, anybody been to Belgium? The irony of Belgium, Belgium is one of the 27 members of the European Union. And it is the one European Union country that is voted most likely to split in half into two states at some point in the near future, because the northern half of Belgium, and Belgium is a pretty small country, is Dutch-speaking right up against the Netherlands, and the southern half is French-speaking right up against the French border, with Brussels, an international city, in the middle as the headquarters of the European Union. And the European Union put its headquarters in Brussels in the hopes of keeping Belgium from splitting in two. Belgium is a monarch, but the northern part has power as the Dutch-speaking part, the southern part has power as the French-speaking part. And in fact, when trade deals have to be negotiated, like one between in the south and the Dutch part in the north agreed to it first. And in fact, that deal got held up because Belgium is so badly divided between the two sides. Now, if you go to Brussels, and I've been there quite a bit because of EU stuff, and taking our students there quite a bit, you don't have that sense. In fact, it's very international, very English-speaking. But outside of that, there's a split. So I found it ironic that Belgium was in support of the two-state solution, because that might be what's going to happen there at some point in the near future. Security Council resolutions have in the past called for a two-state solution. We've been playing that song forever, based on 67 lines, and the UN has repeatedly called Israeli settlements illegal, which that is true. December 2016 resolution, frequently cited by the Palestinians that the US abstained on, reaffirms that any Israeli settlement in Palestinian territory occupied since '67, including East Jerusalem, has no legal validity and constitutes a flagrant violation under national law and a major obstacle to the achievement of the two-state solution, which is true, but the United States abstained on the vote. Which I have a feeling that if that showed up again, the Trump administration would veto it. Which is important again to repeat, from Truman to Obama, regardless of party, the United States was always pro-Israel, but sort of took a step back. Trump stepped into the mess and just made everything worse from my perspective. The Council also underlines it will not recognize any changes to the 67 lines, including with regard to Jerusalem, other than those agreed by the parties through negotiations. The Council statement came amid 2 days of intense fighting between Israel and the Islamic Jihad militant group in the Gaza Strip. Well, if I was in the Gaza Strip, I'd probably join the Islamic Jihad militant group, but there were no reports of civilian casualties on either side, but an informal ceasefire aimed at ending the fighting appeared to be taking hold early Tuesday. Trump's plan, announced at the White House in late January with much fanfare, grants Israel sovereignty over large parts of the occupied West Bank and falls far short of the Palestinian dream of an independent state. In fact, the United States wouldn't even discuss it until Palestine gave up the dream of an independent state. And I always like it when they say dream, because that's very consistent with the poetic nature of Palestine. A disjointed archipelago of land, and only if they meet a stringent set of demands. Under its terms, the proposed Palestinian state and the military would be still run by the Israeli Defense Forces. That would be like saying to the United States, back in the 1700s, the British would say, well, you can have your independence, but you can't have an army and a navy, and instead you will be protected by the British Army and Navy. I mean, obviously we would never go for that. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas called the U.S. proposal, quote, an Israeli-American preemptive plan in order to put an end to the question of Palestine, unquote, in a speech to the Security Council on February 11th, and said that this disjointed Palestinian state it envisioned is like a Swiss cheese, obviously full of holes. So I think the American version of the two-state solution, I think, is DOA. The Council press statement adopted Monday reaffirms, quote, that all parties should refrain from undermining the viability of the two-state solution in order to maintain the prospects for a just, comprehensive, and lasting peace. Council members stressed the need to exert collective efforts to launch credible negotiations on all final status issues in the Middle East peace process. The council also expressed grave concern about acts of violence against civilians. Belgium's UN ambassador, Mark Pekstein de Boitswerve, boy, I'm really massacring that, read the statement after UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East, Nikolay Mladenov, briefed the council at an open meeting. Mladenov, who addressed the council by video while fighting rage between Israel and Islamic Jihad, called for an immediate stop to the firing of rockets and mortars that only risk dragging Gaza into another round of hostilities with no end in sight. On the political front, he said that with no Israeli-Palestinian negotiations on the horizon, developments on the ground continue to undermine prospects for a two-state solution. But they keep dancing the same dance and getting nowhere. Maybe the two-state solution is not the answer. And maybe the one-state solution is not the answer. Maybe confederation is the only way out of this. Mladenov pointed to Israeli demolition. I just dropped the mouse. Pointed to Israeli demolitions and seizures of Palestinian structures, Israeli approvals for new housing and settlements, and the threat of Israeli annexation of parts of the West Bank. He reiterated Secretary General Antonio Guterres' statement, that's the Secretary General of the UN, that possible annexation or similar moves would have a devastating impact on the prospect for a two-state solution. They would close the door to negotiations, have negative repercussions across the region, and severely undermine opportunities for normalization and regional peace.
Now, you may not remember, but on the syllabus,
one of the things I talked about was using George Mitchell's approach to how we finally settled the conflict in Northern Ireland, which is not altogether different. It's not the same, but it's not altogether different because Northern Ireland is still part of the United Kingdom, but it's on the same island that the Republic of Ireland is on. You're all too young to remember the constant violence that used to be there with Catholics in the south and Protestants in the north. World for a great long period now. Brexit leaving the European Union is kind of messing this up. But George Mitchell had principles, and they're on the policy proposal and the simulation for how to settle the conflict. They're somewhat generic, but I think if we follow that guideline, that would work out really well. And if I have some time, we'll take a look at that. But let me stop for a moment and see if anybody has a comment or a question. I'm kind of talking like a motor mouth today. Anybody have a question or a comment? Okay, then Megan shared another article with me. It's just a good day to catch up on all this stuff. Israel leader vows thousands of new homes in East Jerusalem, which is the Muslim part where, as I mentioned to you when I went there, that's where I stayed. I felt much more comfortable than I went into West Jerusalem. Israel's prime minister says the country is moving ahead with the building of thousands of homes in two key East Jerusalem neighborhoods off from the rest of the West Bank. In a visit to the Har Homa neighborhood, Netanyahu pledged to build the homes there and in the Givat Hamatos neighborhood. Both lie on some of the last spaces of land linking the Palestinian areas of the West Bank to their hope for capital in East Jerusalem. If you can't build a wall, put up houses which act and do the same thing. Netanyahu pledged to turn Har Homa into a mid-sized city and expanding a presence that many people believe has already dealt a devastating blow to the Palestinian dream. I see they're very good at this dream stuff. I love it. Independence. Building in the areas has previously sparked international outcry, which has at times reigned in Netanyahu's settlement building sprees. But emboldened by President Donald Trump's support and his favorable Middle East plan, he appears to be charging ahead with construction there. And Netanyahu and Trump are buddies, and Trump was impeached, and Netanyahu is still under criminal indictment, but he can't be tried until he's out of the office of Prime Minister. We are connecting Jerusalem. We are connecting all parts of the United Jerusalem, the rebuilt Jerusalem. We did it in the face of fierce international opposition. We surmounted all the obstacles, and we have done it. Netanyahu said he was pushing forward with 5,200 homes for Jews in the area, in addition to 1,000 new homes for Palestinians who live in Jerusalem's nearby Beit Safafa neighborhood. It's nice that at least they're getting some new homes, because as I mentioned to you, East Jerusalem is pretty run down because the Israeli government simply won't take care of it. As I mentioned to you, they don't pick up the garbage and there's no mail service. Deliberately to drive people out. The Palestinians want East Jerusalem along with the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Land, Israel captured in the '67 war for their future state. They have long opposed construction in this part of East Jerusalem, claiming it would isolate Jerusalem from the West Bank, which I would suggest to you is the point of the housing. The Palestinians had no immediate reaction to Netanyahu's latest announcement, but the settlement watchdog Peace Now said expanding both controversial neighborhoods amounted to state suicide, a very strong statement that at some point we need to think about. Both several parts of East Jerusalem and the connection to Bethlehem, which is not that far away, preventing a viable two-state solution. So on the one hand, everybody's calling for a two-state solution, and meanwhile, Israel is doing everything it can to destroy it, including that very strong statement, state suicide. Israel has annexed East Jerusalem in a move not recognized by most of the international community, and it considers the entire city as its eternal, undivided capital. Eternal not only would suggest upending decades of U.S. foreign policy, 70 years of it, the Trump administration recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Under Trump's Mideast vision, Israel would attain full control of the city and its venerated holy sites, which would include Jewish, Muslim, and Christian sites. Palestinians would get a capital of neighborhoods located behind a hulking concrete separation barrier. So we'll put it in the suburbs and you can have a capital, but you're going to have to go through the barrier and the checkpoints to visit the holy sites in Jerusalem. Palestinians, not surprisingly, rejected the plan. With the corruption trial looming, he, as I said, is indicted for criminal behavior. He is innocent until proven guilty, and he can't be tried until the election is over. And Netanyahu faces re-election next month. So they're in the country's third vote in less than a year. So there is an election in March. Does anybody know the date of the Israeli election by any chance? Or if you have the computer, you can look it up. I'm not sure when that's going to be. I know it's in March, but.
It was March 3rd.
March 3rd?
Oh wait, and then it got pushed back to March 16th.
St. Patrick's Day?
Yeah, so that March 3rd conflicted with the Israeli Memorial Day, so it got moved to March 16th.
March 16th? Okay, so the day before St. Patrick's Day. So that would be 2 weeks from Monday. During the campaign, Netanyahu has repeatedly pandered to his nationalist base of voters, whom he hopes will turn out en masse to deliver him victory over his centrist rivals in the Blue and White Party. Even with tensions high after the unveiling of Trump's plan, Israel and the Palestinians managed to resolve one of their nagging disputes Thursday by reaching an agreement to to end an escalating trade crisis. Before we get to that, also keep in mind that there are Arabs and Palestinians who live in Israel who can vote in the national election, but who knows what their turnout will be. Defense Minister Naftali Bennett said Israel would begin allowing Palestinian agricultural exports, which is the bulk of their exports, after the Palestinians resumed accepting Israeli beef. The Palestinian Agricultural Ministry, which I guess would fall under economics, said Israel had allowed the Palestinians to import beef directly from abroad without acknowledging whether the Palestinians had agreed to accept Israeli beef. The trade crisis erupted in September when the Palestinians decided to stop importing beef from Israel. The PA claimed most of the 120,000 head of cattle they imported monthly from Israel was itself imported, and they therefore preferred to import directly from abroad. So basically they were saying that it's sent to Israel and then we got to get it from you. Why can't we just get it directly? But if we do that, we will import the beef from Israel and then you import it from us. Shortly after the September announcement, Israeli cattle ranchers saw a drop in their boycott and stopped importing Israeli vegetables, fruits, beverages, and mineral water. Palestinians said their actions were aimed at pressuring Israel into a crisis. Thank you for that. This was a lot of good stuff in there. So I know I've been talking a lot, but there's so much going on in the world with this issue. And at some point, we're going to be doing a proposal. And since I brought it up, I guess I'm taking it right from the syllabus. Develop and evaluate existing and potential policy proposals and strategies from the bottom up, meaning us as the Palestinian people, instead of top down. So at some point, you know, in the simulation, we have to develop proposals. And we're going to have to develop one overall proposal to bring about a solution in that part of the world from our perspective. But then also we're going to have to do an economics proposal, a human rights proposal, and an environment proposal, all which would feed out of. So we're going to end up with 4 proposals, which is a lot. But I mentioned to you George Mitchell's 5 Principles of Peace, Northern Ireland and the Middle East. So he was trying to point out that we solved the Northern Ireland problem by following these principles, and we could use the same in the Middle East. So when we get to the point of developing a proposal to solve the problem overall, I would suggest that we follow George Mitchell's principles. First, there's no such thing as a conflict that can't be ended. Second, need for a clear and determined policy not to yield to those willing to use violence. Third, willingness to compromise. Fourth, implementation of agreements is as difficult and as important as. So I just want to remind you about that. Hopefully you kept your syllabus, but I think we could at least do a quick read through on Kaylee's economic minister opening statement, and then that would leave us with Monday to look at Cassie's environmental one. And I'm not going to myself. The people of Palestine thank all gathered here today for being part of what is an important discussion on the rights and freedoms of all humans around the globe. Palestine is here as a sovereign state to demand justice on the grounds that our self-determination and homeland have been stripped of us by the supremacist Zionist movement. Well, Kaylee's got the right attitude. if you're listening to me, Kayla, because she's out there. Israel extracts daily violence towards our people in an effort to colonize our land and deny us the basic human rights afforded to others. We call upon the UN to denounce these actions and recognize Palestine as an independent state, which they sort of done with that two-state vote. Palestine demands that we are listened to and our wishes honored on the world stage. We demand the right to return to our homeland and the freedom to move without harassment when we do. We demand Israel remove its illegal settlements from our land, including the Gaza Strip. I don't think we have any in the Gaza Strip, but that's okay. But as the economics minister for Palestine, this speech will be focusing on the denied right the Palestinian people have to thrive. So I think she gets to the point of smacking everybody around with our demands. And I don't know, President Abbas, do you have any comments on this opening part?
I just have one question. Are we to give these as a speech? Is it a speech or is it?
No, it's not, because it's, it's all text-based and it'll be put on the website. But that's okay to do it, because this sounds more like she's giving a speech, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's okay. It's part of her rhetoric. So I don't think that's a problem. It reads more like a speech than a statement, but once we go along with this, it'll be posted. So did you have a comment other than that, or?
No, I like everything.
Israel extends their control into Palestine in many ways the world is not aware of. One such way is in our trade. Palestine relies on Israel heavily, with over 50% of our exports going directly to them. When Palestine attempted to exercise its right to trade with other nations for cattle, so she's referencing the article, so she's been keeping abreast of stuff. Israel responded by refusing fruit and vegetable shipments. Palestine's economy heavily relies on agriculture, true, and the impact on the Palestinian people because of acts of cruelty like this, she's not messing with these people, hurts them severely. Palestine does not have the backing of the richest country of earth, which obviously is the United States, like Israel does. So acts like these serve no other purpose than to attempt to cripple our country from within. Israel will not allow Palestine to thrive or even control our own economy, instead treating us like a puppet state with lands they can take at whim. The Palestinian economy is hurt in other ways by Israel. The World Bank has recognized that Israel's restrictions on our trade in the West Bank and Gaza have crippled our economy. The Israeli checkpoints and blockades hamper even simple movement of cargo from point A to point B. The unemployment rate in Gaza is 70%. That's shocking. And Palestine has no chance of recovering without intervention from the countries that enabled Zionists to carry out these ills towards us. I think that expand. Let me just be all typo there.
Or she's asking whether.
Yeah, or she's asking what we can expand on.
Oh, I see. It's a note.
Yeah.
No, I think I don't think we need to. I think she got the most. We can't move, and there's unemployment of 70%. That's crazy. So okay, I get your point that you thought.
Yeah. If
Give me a
anything,
day off, and I get confused.
if
Also
anything,
add the license plate stuff and the.
I think that the legal age is 15, but because of security issues for different companies, it's actually 18. So if she was to put like 70% of and put the number,
The number.
population number,
Okay,
So-
so you're suggesting add the population number?
yeah. So it's put into
So
that perspective.
The number of people who are eligible to work, or the number of people who live there? Because the unemployment rate is usually based on the number of people eligible to work.
Yeah,
So Kaylee, I know you view these, so Megan's suggesting that we put a population number here to illustrate when it's 70% of the eligible workforce, how many people that actually is, which was even more shocking. And then these cruel tactics have been enabled by the poorly thought out and vague Balfour Declaration, and only its being overturned will help start to restore the rights of the Palestinian. Must remove all trade restrictions on Palestine and especially Gaza. So, I mean, I think if Kaylee is okay with that, Kaylee's out in another world because she's one of our remote students. If you want to add that to this and send it off again to me when you can, then if you think that's okay, then I could say that we got the econ ready. But I think over the current situation over there, so I think Kaylee's got it. So I think we're cooking with gas. All we got to do is look at Cassie's, and then we'll be sitting pretty. As the French would say. Well, thank you for all the leads. I'm sorry I haven't looked at the video yet, but stuff stacks up over my desk like airplanes over JFK.